I got knocked down by a car and ended up with a head injury. The doc mentioned I might have some amnesia. Just for laughs, I asked the girl chilling by my bed who she was. She paused and said we were just regular friends. I was staring at Bella, who was sitting next to me, saying regular friends? With this icy, distant vibe, like she wasn't even kidding. The word gotcha stuck in my throat, and I just stared at her in silence. I figured if the doctor hadn't called her, she probably wouldn't have shown up at the hospital. But I didn't question her. Instead, I hesitated for a sec before forcing a casual smile. "Is that so? That's really nice of you." She replied with a cold, like I was wasting her time. She glanced down, turned on her phone, checked something, and said, "Now that you're awake, I gotta head out. Got work to do." Before I could react, she was up and about, reaching the door and pulling it open. Maybe a tiny bit of guilt got her to turn around and tell me to rest well. My smile disappeared as soon as she closed the door behind her, leaving me blank-faced. No one knew Bella and I were together. We were college sweethearts, and after graduation, we moved down south together, landing jobs at elite marketing in Metroville. We were young and knew office romances weren't cool, so we agreed to keep our relationship on the down low. 4 years later, we both got promoted to business managers, each leading our own teams in direct competition. That just gave us more reason to keep things hush-hush, so we've been keeping it a secret ever since. I had asked her once if we should make things public since there wasn't a strict company rule against it, but she always brushed it off without much thought. I wasn't even sure if we were still a couple. But today, I got my answer. The doc told Bella I might have temporary memory loss, but assured her I'd be fine soon. Even in that messed up situation, she still said we were just regular friends. She probably wasn't worried about being questioned if I remembered. She didn't care if I was truly amnesiac or just messing around. She likely wanted to break up ages ago. After all, if we hadn't broken up, how could she be openly seeing Leo? A guy's gut is often sharper than radar. Actually, Bella and I had already grown apart long before. We'd been together forever, from sophomore year in college until now. 7 years total. We knew each other inside out, so any shift in her behavior didn't slip by me unnoticed. The signs probably started when a new intern joined her department. He was tall and good-looking, named Leo. His last name was Lee, and the HR person who handled employee records once gossiped that under the father's name on his application, he had written Victor Lee, the company owner, a rich second-gen heir running his own family business. At first, Bella explained her extra attention to Leo by saying it wasn't smart to offend him and that he was just a goofy guy, not my type at all. "You're overthinking it," she said. I took her word for it. Later, I wasn't sure if she wasn't taking me seriously or just didn't bother hiding anything from me. Within 2 weeks of Leo joining, I logged into her long unused music account, trying to find some background tunes. I found out she and Leo were following each other, which was weird since she hadn't listened to music in years because she was so busy. This was an account we used in college when we listened to music together, logging almost 9,000 hours of shared listening time. She had even made a playlist named after me, packed with love songs that reminded her of me. Songs from my favorite artists, tracks I'd shared on social media, and tunes she listened to during our long-distance breaks. When I checked, I saw she had deleted that playlist. Instead, her recent listens were filled with K-pop songs, something she usually wasn't into, but Leo was all about. We work in marketing, so I convinced myself she was just trying to stay on top of current trends. Maybe I was just overthinking it. So, I quietly logged out of her account without saying anything. I'm not one to make a scene without solid proof. After all, the one who stays calm and quiet till the end usually has the least to say. Of course, her interactions with Leo didn't stop there. In early February, she led her project team on a new assignment. At the time, I was leading a different project in another city, and I occasionally heard her project involved a tough British client. After a long day with no time to eat, I called her to ask about the project's progress. She didn't pick up, probably busy, so I texted her, but she never replied. Later, I saw a group photo she posted on social media with Leo beside her, flashing a bright smile and giving a peace sign. It looked like the project was going well. Her caption read, Know yourself, know your enemy. Leo posted a similar pic with the caption, "Victory in every battle." I checked their profiles and saw they had even changed their status messages to these phrases, like they were sharing a secret code, something only they understood within the project. Since she hadn't returned my call or text, but commented on Leo's post with, "Eat quickly, take care of your stomach," I rubbed my own growling, slightly aching stomach and turned off my phone. This was the second time I chose to tolerate her behavior. I got discharged 3 days later after the doc confirmed I was fine. That day, I didn't get a single message from Bella. However, she did send a bouquet of cappuccino-colored flowers. I decided to give her one more shot. I sat in the hospital corridor and called her. It took her a while to answer. I gently asked, "Bella, I'm getting out today. Can you pick me up?" We both avoided mentioning Amnesia and regular friends, as if those words never existed. She didn't respond right away. After a moment, she said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm really busy and can't get away. Should I call a cab for you?" "What are you busy with?" I asked calmly. She paused, probably surprised. I'm usually considerate, rarely pushing for answers so hard. I knew our first project had just wrapped up and it was a quiet time for both of us. Yet she claimed to be busy. She didn't reply. I sighed and hung up. A woman's love or lack thereof is often painfully obvious. I remembered when we had just graduated and started working. One night, I had a bad bout of gastroenteritis at 3 a.m. Before passing out, I managed to call her. When I woke up, she was sitting by my bed, eyes red. One foot was in a slipper, the other in a sneaker, both left-footed. I couldn't help but smile weakly. She looked at me, still shaken, tears welling up again. "You're still smiling." "When I saw you collapse at the door, I nearly had a heart attack. In times like this, you should call 911 first." What if I hadn't answered? It's so dangerous. I smiled at her, feeling both dependent and trusting. But in my heart, you're the safest person, see? There was a time when she genuinely cared about me. We loved each other deeply and sincerely. Even though those days are almost unrecognizable now, remembering those distant memories still brings a faint, self-mocking smile to my lips. I shook my head and tossed the cappuccino-colored bouquet into the trash. "Don't like the flowers?" someone asked from behind. I turned around to see a stranger pointing at the trash, apologizing. "I'm sorry, the driver accidentally hit you yesterday. I brought you to the hospital, and after contacting your emergency contact, I had to leave for other commitments. These are a discharge gift, and I've already covered your hospital bills. Sorry for the inconvenience. If you need anything else, let me know." I laughed to myself, realizing even the flowers were from a stranger. I looked up and apologized politely. "I'm sorry, I thought they were from someone else." Inside, I sighed. I've always been reasonable and well-mannered. But being polite doesn't mean I'm weak or easy to take advantage of. It's clear that Bella and I are truly done. When I got home from the hospital, Bella was already there. I opened the door and walked in to see her sitting on the sofa. The TV was on, playing a show she wasn't interested in, and she was holding her phone, smiling faintly as she chatted with someone. The soft glow from the phone screen lit up her face. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that kind of gentle smile on her face. I paused at the door, and she was so into her phone that she didn't hear me until I softly called her name. "Bella." She quickly wiped the smile off her face and looked up, startled. My eyes fell on her hands. She instinctively locked her phone and placed it face down on the sofa, looking at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. "You're discharged?" I finally allowed myself to smile at her and at myself. I looked at her calmly, speaking softly but detached. "Let's talk." Our breakup was surprisingly peaceful. We're both pretty composed people, and the whole thing didn't drag out. We're mature adults who care about appearances, and everything was clear. There wasn't much to discuss. We both understood without needing to say it. After I said, "Let's break up," she didn't ask why. She just stayed silent. I think she felt a sense of relief at that moment. After a while, she finally said, "I'm sorry, but I didn't accept her apology. I just calmly made plans for what would happen after the breakup." My tone was steady, and I didn't seem sad. She was surprised by how I handled it. When I suggested she move out soon, she suddenly interrupted me, asking, "Ethan, you don't seem sad at all." She furrowed her brows a bit, staring at my face with focused curiosity like she didn't get it. Women can be such ironic creatures. Even if they no longer love you, even if the breakup is exactly what they wanted, they still feel unsatisfied seeing you so calm and composed. Maybe in her mind, I should be crying and begging her to stay so she could feel a bit satisfied amidst her frustration. I looked up at her, my expression neutral. I didn't tell her I had already dealt with my sadness when she ignored my messages, but commented on Leo's latest post, when she deleted the playlist she'd made for me just to listen to K-pop with Leo, when she told me we weren't just friends while I pretended to have amnesia, when she was caught up in that ambiguous adult game of push and pull with Leo. Thinking I wasn't aware, I had already moved on. To me, Bella was like a benign tumor growing inside me. It wasn't deadly, but I knew if I let it stay, it'd slowly turn bad, eating away at my health and energy. There was nothing to fear. I just needed to cut it out while it was still manageable. The pain would be temporary, but eventually, I'd heal. Before Bella finished packing and left, I calmly asked her one last question. "Bella, did you lose interest in me because Leo is Victor's son, or just because he's who he is?" She stood by the door, turning back to look at me with the same beauty and grace she had when I first met her in college. Her pretty face had matured from youthful innocence into a calm and composed elegance. I had always thought she was still the girl who blushed while awkwardly confessing to me on the playground. But at that moment, I realized that somewhere along the way she had turned into an adult who weighed the pros and cons deep down in her ambition. She paused before finally saying, "Ethan, people always want to reach higher." Her words made me chuckle softly, but I respected her for being at least 70% honest. I looked at her and smiled sincerely. "Bella, I wish you success in your climb to the top. May you achieve all that you desire." Her eyes lingered on my face, with a faint hint of regret hidden in them, but that regret was probably nothing compared to her ambition. Finally, she sighed and said, "Ethan, don't hate me." I didn't respond to her. The downside of an office romance is that even after a breakup, you can't just move on and forget each other. People still have to go to work. When the taxi stopped downstairs at the company, I saw Bella and Leo. They weren't alone. There were other team members too. It was lunchtime and they were probably heading out to eat together. Leo was lively, his face lit up with a bright smile. He was facing Bella with his back to the street, gesturing animatedly as he talked. Bella had a smile on her lips, her eyes gentle as she watched him. She kept an eye on the crowd and the street behind him, pulling his arm to steer him away from bumping into people. It was both familiar and strange. After our breakup, she looked so happy. I stayed in the car, watching until their figures disappeared into the tea house downstairs, before I looked away. The driver gave me a curious look and asked, "Are you secretly in love with that pretty girl?" I smiled and explained, "She's my ex." The driver's expression instantly went from curious to awkward, like he wanted to comfort me but didn't know how. I added kindly, "It's cool, it doesn't bother me." When I walked into the office, Maya was thrilled to see me and hurried over, saying, "Ethan, you're out of the hospital. Honestly, you should have let us visit you." I smiled and replied while walking, "It's nothing serious, and besides, I'm fine now, right? How's the review of the tea house case going?" She followed me back to my office with the printed materials in hand, passing me a stack of documents before glancing around the office. Seeing that there weren't many people around, she leaned closer and whispered, "Ethan, don't look at the data yet. I have something to tell you." I put down the documents and looked up at her. There was a hint of frustration on her face as she said, "Ethan, you know that Max is taking over the Nanjing branch next month, right? We've all been talking about it, and it looks like the director position he's leaving behind will likely be between you and Bella. Over the years, the two of you have been equally matched in performance. I'm not trying to gossip, but based on merit, whether it's you or Bella getting the promotion, we'd all be convinced. She hesitated, biting her lower lip like she was struggling to speak. I smiled gently and said, "It's cool, it's just the two of us, go ahead." She paused before finally whispering, "But a few days ago, I saw Bella and Leo hugging in the break room. The fact that Leo's suspected to be Victor's son isn't exactly a secret in the company, which is why Maya was so upset. She probably felt that Bella would have an unfair advantage." As I rolled the edge of the document in my hand, I felt like laughing. So, while I was in the hospital wondering what Bella was doing with no word from her, she was having an affair with a rich second-gen heir. But that's not surprising. I laughed at myself and reassured Maya, "It's okay. Personnel decisions are made by the higher-ups. We just need to do our jobs and let things play out." Maya sighed, and I lowered my head to keep reviewing the data. When Bella knocked on my office door, I was pretty surprised. After all, in my mind, even though our breakup was cool and didn't end in a fight, that just meant I was a decent person. It didn't mean Bella and I could casually chat and pretend to be normal colleagues unless necessary. I thought we'd both avoid any private communication, until I understood why she came. She stood in front of my desk, her gaze coolly fixed on me. After a moment, she said, "Ethan, I thought you'd resign." Her tone was a mix of persuasion and warning. "Ethan, we've been together for 7 years. Don't say I'm being ruthless. But when Max heads to Nanjing next month, one of us will get promoted to director to fill his spot. If I were you, I'd start planning ahead and find another way out." I looked at her, understanding what she meant. She was sure she'd get the position and was advising me to resign. Otherwise, once she became director and with Victor's son as her boyfriend, she'd probably force me out to avoid any gossip. Her warning was her kind way of telling me to make other plans. I can handle a woman's fickleness and change of heart because emotions aren't something to be tested, but I didn't expect her to lose even the last bit of humanity. I looked at her like she was a stranger and said the first curse word that came to mind. "Bella, you're a piece of trash." She silently accepted it. My first face-off with Leo happened a week after my chat with Bella. After our breakup, Bella, who had previously refused to go public about our relationship under the excuse that office romances aren't a good idea, was now flaunting her relationship with Leo. I saw their lovey-dovey posts on social media. There were countless colleagues congratulating them, but only our mutual college friends were shocked and messaged me on WeChat, asking what happened. I didn't respond to any of them. The day Leo showed up in front of me was just an ordinary afternoon. Most of the office staff were either out for lunch or chilling at their desks. I was alone in the break room, grinding coffee beans. As the rich aroma of coffee filled the air, Leo appeared behind me. I stepped aside to let him pass, but he didn't walk by. Instead, he stood in front of me, his gaze lingering on me with a somewhat meaningful look before abruptly saying, "I know you and Bella used to be together." "Bella," he called her sweetly. He had a baby face and was shorter than me. I looked down at him calmly, raising an eyebrow in slight confusion. He looked up at me, his eyes slowly scanning my face. And when he didn't get the reaction he was hoping for, there was a hint of disappointment in his expression. After a pause, he continued, "I saw that playlist she named after you. You two weren't very good at keeping your relationship a secret." I stayed silent, patiently waiting for him to finish. He went on, "My dad really likes Bella, you know. Bella is strong and independent, mature and driven. My dad says Bella reminds him of himself when he was young. He wants to mentor her. Bella's future is limitless, and as it happens, I like her a lot too, and she likes me. Now we're together, but Ethan, your presence is quite bothersome. I hope you'll be sensible enough to resign on your own." That's when I realized what he was after. First to show off, then to intimidate, and finally to gently persuade me to leave on my own. I held my cup, my expression calm, my tone steady, even with a slight smile. I looked down at him and said, "Mr. Lee, any changes in an employee's position need to go through the proper channels. I'm not sure if you're here to fire me or what. If you are, company policy says HR should handle it and inform me of the reason for my dismissal." His face went pale, probably not expecting me to be so unyielding. Before I turned to leave, I added, Oh, and for any personnel changes involving managers or above, they need to be personally approved and reported by the chairman. In other words, the only person in the whole company who can fire me is the chairman. Mr. Lee, you're just an intern in Bella's department. You're overstepping. With that, I didn't bother to look at his reaction and left with my cup. Not long after my talk with Leo, the announcement of Max's transfer to Nanjing was made. Before he left, the chairman organized a farewell banquet for him, attended by all the management-level staff of the company. Everyone knew that besides saying goodbye to Max, changes in the core personnel of headquarters would soon follow. When the HR manager placed the invitation on my desk, only Maya looked pale. She was someone I had personally mentored. Leaning over her desk, she first tried to encourage me by saying, "Good luck," and then added solemnly, "Ethan, no matter what happens, our team is behind you. If things don't work out here, we'll follow you wherever you go." I laughed, lightly tapping her forehead with the invitation, and said gently, "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten my motto? Build bridges when you encounter water and pave roads when you meet mountains. What's there to be afraid of? Besides, the one who loses definitely won't be me." I was pretty chill on the day of the dinner. In the private room, heads of the marketing department, management, HR, finance, and various business lines were gathered. Chairman Victor sat at the head of the table, with Leo to his left and Bella next to Leo. When everyone saw Leo sitting beside Victor, they exchanged discreet glances. What had been just a rumor was now confirmed. Seeing an intern seated beside Victor, but since Victor didn't introduce him, everyone acted like they didn't know and didn't ask. I sat properly beside Maya from the finance department, eating, drinking, socializing when needed, and staying silent when appropriate. No one talked about business matters. The dinner was all about Max. The theme, aside from reviewing his contributions to the company, was to wish him success in the Nanjing branch. It wasn't until the meal was almost over and the small talk was done that Victor put down his chopsticks and got to the main point of the dinner. In his early 50s, he looked well-preserved, vibrant, and energetic as if he was in his 40s. His sharp gaze swept across those seated. Then he picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth before saying, "Besides bidding farewell to Max, there's one more thing I want to discuss." I put down my chopsticks and looked over at him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Bella beside me. She wore a faint smile, looking elegant, intelligent, and poised. A perfect match for Leo, who sat smiling beside her. I looked away, lowered my eyes, and slowly started wiping my hands with the towel beside me. Victor's voice was deep and gentle. "As everyone knows, I have only one son. When he graduated, I arranged for him to work in the company. My son is very strong-willed. He didn't want people in the company to know his identity and wanted to work his way up from the bottom. Over the years, he's done well. I've heard many of you praise him in front of me, and I'm pleased. Now the time is right, and with Max heading to Nanjing, I think it's time to introduce him to all of you." His gaze, filled with pride, quietly fell on me from across the table. He smiled and, with a hint of pride, extended his hand toward me, saying warmly, "Ethan, come over to your father. It's time for everyone to meet you." I calmly put down the towel and smiled. In the dead silence that followed, the only sound was Bella's water glass tipping over. I looked in her direction. Her expression was relatively calm. She smiled apologetically while wiping the table with a napkin. Her movement was steady and not the least bit flustered. Then she looked up at me, her face slightly pale, emotions unreadable. I withdrew my gaze without even a sidelong glance. I simply stood up and, under the shocked stares of everyone present, walked toward the head of the table. Placing my hand on the back of Leo's chair, I politely and softly said, "Mr. Lee, could you please move?" I heard someone in the room gasp audibly. Once the dinner had served its purpose, it quickly wrapped up, and I could only imagine the storm this evening's events would cause within the company. What intrigued me more was Bella. She had once told me, "Ethan, people always strive for higher ground." I wondered if now she was on her way to that higher ground. I didn't glance at her, I didn't even bother to look her way. As she was in a daze, Leo came over to bid farewell to my father before leaving. I heard her restrained voice. "Chairman Lee, we're leaving now." I didn't say anything. My father's scrutinizing gaze fell on Bella's face, then shifted to Leo beside her. After a moment, he smiled warmly and said, "All right, all right." After everyone left the room, his smile slowly faded. He looked at me and asked, "What's going on with you and Bella?" Yes, I had mentioned Bella to him just after graduation, but I never told him we were dating. With his experience, he likely figured it out on his own. I smiled, meeting Victor's scrutinizing gaze, and coldly replied, "You saw it yourself, didn't you? She was stolen by Leo. His mother is good at meddling in other people's relationships. So naturally, her son takes after her." I paused and then, emphasizing each word, added, "Father." The last time I called Victor Dad was when I was 7 years old. Back then, he had just divorced my mom. At the gate of our villa, I clung to his sleeve, repeatedly asking, "Dad, Dad, why did Mom divorce you? Say something." But he didn't answer. I didn't understand as a kid, but as I grew older, I learned about the complexities of adult relationships. My dad and Leo's mom were childhood sweethearts. Leo's mom hated my dad for being poor and married someone else. Afterward, my dad married my mom. My mom supported him as they built everything from scratch. Once they became successful, Leo's mom showed up with Leo after divorcing her husband. At that time, Victor was young and prideful, holding a grudge against his childhood sweetheart for choosing wealth over love. But the more he resented her, the harder it was for him to forget. My mom, on the other hand, never spoke much about their past. In front of me, she always maintained my dad's dignity. She was a graceful and dignified woman who divorced swiftly after being betrayed. However, after the divorce, Victor didn't marry Leo's mom either. He just kept her around, mocking her for her poor judgment back then. Leo's original surname was Wong, but he changed it to Lee when he was 8, probably to curry favor with Victor. He and his mother, who had taken over our home, were smug. They didn't know about me, but I knew about them. I found out when I was 8 years old. I had secretly returned to the villa without telling my mom and saw Victor celebrating Leo's birthday. He was holding 8-year-old Leo in his arms, with Leo's mother standing beside him. All three of them were smiling as if they were a real family. After that, I never called Victor Dad again, and we rarely saw each other. Bella only knew that my parents were divorced and that I had taken my mom's surname, changing my name to Ethan M. Later, when I graduated, Victor offered me a job at his company. His exact words were, "All these years, I haven't had any other children, only you. Doesn't your mom understand that? You're my biological son. The business your mother and I built. Who else would I give it to if not you? That aunt of yours has always wanted her son to come to the company to learn, but I've blocked it every time. Ethan, your father knows what he's doing. My mom was a proud and noble woman. When she divorced Victor, she only took what was rightfully hers and nothing more. I'm not like her. Why should I give up what's mine? The more it displeases others, the more it pleases me." So, after graduation, I joined the company with Bella, starting from the bottom of the core business department and working my way up. Victor knew about Bella, paid attention to her, and praised her as young and promising, saying her future was limitless, only because I had mentioned her to him before. My family's relationships were complicated. I had planned to explain everything to Bella when the day came for Victor to make it public, but she gave me a surprise instead. Victor looked at me, and for the first time I saw a weary, tired expression on his face. He sighed and said, "It's my fault. I've wronged you." I chuckled softly, just a man being a man. I suddenly remembered what Leo had said to me in the break room when he tried to intimidate me. He said Victor thought Bella was a lot like him when he was young. I guess they are quite alike in their ruthlessness and their tendency to burn bridges after crossing them. Oh, and they both lack good judgment. I returned to the company 3 days later. By then, the shocking news had been digested by everyone. When I came back, everyone's expressions stayed the same, treating me as usual. No one crowded around to ask questions. They just smiled a bit more warmly than before. These were all seasoned professionals who knew how to strike the right balance. This allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief, and my demeanor stayed as usual. Only Maya was upset with me, complaining about how she had worried for so long, only to find out I had been playing dumb all along. I finally appeased her with a seafood dinner. As she picked at a lobster claw, she asked, "You're the real rich young master, so what is Leo?" I didn't hide anything from her and briefly explained the situation. She looked shocked. Oh my God, I can't believe there are people so shameless in this world. Pretending to be the boss's son to fool everyone, that's disgusting. Ethan, while you were away, a lot of people were gossiping with me. Can I tell them about this? I really can't stand Leo's arrogant attitude. If it were true, fine. But it turns out he's just a fraud. I don't know what he's so smug about. I peeled a piece of lobster meat and with a smile casually said, "It's not really a secret. If someone asks, go ahead and tell them." I didn't underestimate Maya's influence. By the end of the afternoon, the whole company knew the truth about Leo. When I went to the finance department to get the project budget approved, I saw Leo standing in front of Maya's desk. Maya frowned, pointing at the expense reimbursement form, and asked Leo, "Why are you charging the company for a bag you bought? This reimbursement won't be approved. I suggest you review the other reimbursement items more carefully. Don't try to charge personal items to the company account." His expression turned unpleasant at her words, and he grabbed the reimbursement form from the desk. Before leaving, he shot me a nasty glare, like I had put her up to it. I didn't say anything. Since Victor revealed my identity, I started getting involved in all the company's departments. This way, I could get a clearer understanding of the company's overall development. Of course, Bella didn't get promoted to director, and for now, Max is still remotely overseeing things from Nanjing. After I moved up, my managerial position became vacant. Maya still needed more experience and maturity, so we brought in a business manager from another big company to replace me. Once the personnel changes were confirmed, many colleagues sent me congratulatory messages via WeChat or text. Only 2 people didn't, whether out of guilt or something else. Bella and Leo had been avoiding me since I returned to the company, but there was really no need. My time and energy were limited, and with all the company matters I had to handle, I didn't have time to pay attention to them. Besides, bridges are bridges and roads are roads. We were never on the same path, but they probably didn't see it that way. Leo was the first to confront me again in the empty break room, with the same coffee beans. But this time his expression had changed from arrogance to anger. Standing behind me, he spat out, "Hypocrite!" I ignored him, so he continued, "Your mother pretended not to care about anything when she walked away, saying she'd never have anything to do with the Lee family again. I thought you two didn't care about the Lee family's assets, but it turns out you're just hypocrites. You act all detached and above it all, but in reality, you're fighting to come back. If you were really so noble and didn't care, if you really looked down on my dad's assets, you should have stayed far away. All talk, but in your hearts, you're hypocritical and disgusting." His words made me laugh, and I actually did laugh out loud. I don't enjoy dealing with unintelligent people, especially Leo. Maya had once asked if I had plans to deal with Leo, and while it might sound unbelievable, I hadn't really thought about it. Because as long as he stayed in the company, there'd naturally be others to make his life difficult. The one who would suffer wouldn't be me, other than the little attention he got from Bella. I had never considered him a rival. He simply wasn't worthy. I looked at him with a gentle gaze, as if watching a clown perform. "Leo, stop saying such stupid things. Look at you, so agitated and upset. All I did was take back what's mine. Yet you're acting like I've taken a piece of your heart. If I were you, I'd go home and tell your mother to come up with new ways to win over the old man. It's really pathetic. After all these years of you and your mother trying so hard to please and flatter Victor, all you've got is a meager monthly allowance, not even a house. But don't worry. Now that I'm taking over the company, your and your mother's allowance won't be cut off. Consider it your well-earned reward for keeping the old man happy." His face turned from green to purple, then finally pale as he listened to my words. Then, as if he had thought of something, his mouth twisted into a smile like he'd found a weapon to use against me. I can't outtalk you, but Ethan, I'm not left with nothing. The girlfriend you loved for 7 years is still mine, isn't she? I didn't even lift my eyelids. Trash belongs in the trash can. If she's yours, then she's yours. What's there to brag about? I thought, not even lifting my eyelids. Trash belongs in the trash can. If she's yours, then she's yours. What's there to brag about? I think Leo chose Bella, maybe because he liked her, but also because in his eyes, Bella was the youngest manager in the company's leadership, and Victor favored her. He might have believed Bella's future went far beyond a department director. He needed to establish himself in the company, and Bella was his best ally. In a way, Leo and Bella are quite a match. They both put up a facade, using each other to climb higher, only to end up with nothing. Deeply disappointed. It's funny when you think about it. After I finished speaking, I was truly tired of the conversation. With a patient yet firm tone, I looked at him and said, "This is the last time I'll be this polite to you, Leo. I hope you have enough sense to keep a low profile in the company. Otherwise, I guarantee I won't always be this good-tempered." His eyes filled with tears at my words, but I wasn't Bella, and I didn't have any pity for him. I stood there smiling as I watched the tears well up in his eyes and thought to myself how satisfying they were to see. Bella's resignation didn't surprise me. I couldn't think of a reason for her to stay. All her resignation procedures followed the normal process. I didn't intervene until all the steps were done. On her last day at the company, for some reason, she sent me a message asking if we could talk. I didn't know what there was to talk about between us. The night Victor revealed my identity, she had also called me, saying she was waiting for me outside my apartment. Coincidentally, Victor had asked me to stay at the main house for a few days to go over the company's relationships with him. I didn't go back to my apartment, nor did I reply to her message. After that, she wisely didn't bother me again, maybe because this was the final farewell. Even though I didn't respond to her message, she still came to find me. I had always admired a certain calmness in her demeanor. Maybe it's a trait all successful people have, the ability to pretend as if the betrayals between us never happened. She was so composed it made me doubt whether my memories were accurate. Her expression was indifferent, revealing little emotion, and she even smiled like we were old friends. Standing at the door, she asked, "Shall we talk?" I stayed silent as she walked in and handed me a cup of coffee. I took it, and we stood side by side in front of the large floor-to-ceiling windows. The night had fallen, and the city's skyscrapers were lit up like stars in the Milky Way. I heard Bella sigh beside me. "Do you remember when we first started working here? That was nearly 5 years ago. 2 fresh grads in a similar high-rise, overlooking the city lights. Back then, you joined the company with big plans, only to be assigned the most insignificant tasks. Later, you landed a $1 million deal through your skills. I still remember the look on your face, pale from drinking too much, but still excited as you looked at me." She said, "Ethan, let's build a home together in this city." Later, that big deal became her boss's achievement, and she only got a 500 yuan bonus. She used that 500 yuan to treat me to a hot pot meal. Sitting across from me, the steam obscured her face. But I remember her voice. It was the first and last time I saw a look of bewilderment on her face. She asked me, "Ethan, how long will it take for us to make something of ourselves?" After that meal, I went to see Victor. Since he divorced my mom, she hadn't seen him, let alone touched his money or resources. Even though he gave me an unlimited credit card, neither my mom nor I had ever used it. That was the first time I asked him for help. For Bella. I still remember the surprise on Victor's face. He was happy that I was willing to ask for his help, but I also remember his meaningful words. "Ethan, if she can't handle such a small matter in the real world and needs my help, she's not worthy of being a daughter-in-law of the Lee family." Even though he said that, he still noticed Bella and praised her a few times in public. When the higher-ups show favor, it's like a guiding light. Naturally, Bella's career flourished afterward, and she was smart and capable on her own. I just didn't realize that along this path of handling things, we had gradually drifted apart. She aimed to rise to the top by winning the princess's favor. Maybe in her mind, that was what it meant to make something of herself. Her voice came from the gap in time, filled with nostalgic sighs. How did we end up like this? I scoffed. Bella, don't try to play the nostalgia card with me. I understood your earlier actions of seeking better opportunities, but now, don't make me lose all respect for you. She laughed too, turning her head to focus on me. She didn't continue speaking, but after a while, the smile on her lips faded bit by bit, and she looked at me with a serious expression. Can we not even be regular friends? Ethan, I betrayed you and you hid things from me. Doesn't that make us even? I sighed, looking back at her with indifference. I don't know what you mean by even. When you say even, are you basing it on the fact that I'm Victor's son? Did you really never think about it? If I weren't Victor's son, what would my situation be now? I watched you and the chairman's son carry on your affair, flaunting your love, while I, under your influence and pressure, had no choice but to resign. According to the non-compete agreement, I couldn't even work in the same industry. All the years I spent gaining experience, all my hard work, all my struggles, would have become nothing more than stepping stones for you and Leo to walk on. When I was wandering the streets, lost and broken, I imagined you and Leo were enjoying the best life had to offer in some high-rise downtown, right? Bella, now you're telling me we're even. Do you really think there's a way for us to be even? Finally, I looked at her pale, dazed face and smiled slightly, distant and indifferent. Bella, there's no even. You owe me and you'll owe me for the rest of your life. I'm not planning to be magnanimous and forgive you. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If we meet again, we'll just be strangers. After that, I didn't waste any more time talking to her. I glanced at my watch and politely said, "It's time for you to go." Bella's departing figure was shaky. Over the years, I had rarely seen her look so defeated, but this was the path she chose. Later, at an industry summit, I ran into Bella once or twice. By then, I had already taken over Victor's position and was treated like a star wherever I went. She stood on the outskirts of the crowd, starting over at a new company, a new beginning, slowly climbing up again. She didn't even have the qualifications to talk to me. Later, during a meal with Victor, he casually mentioned Leo's relationship, saying he had been swindled out of money and affection, calling him brainless. I don't know when Bella and Leo broke up, but it's no surprise that two people who came together out of interest eventually parted ways for the same reason. I held my teacup, gazing at the garden in full bloom. Spring had deepened in April. It was already another year gone by. The past had long been left behind, having overcome numerous challenges.